Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Sorry for no videos in the past 2 days. I've been deathly sick. I don't know if you hear that. It sounds disgusting though. And here we open up with Magnus Carlsen playing D4. We get knight to F6. We get knight to F3. Here we see it transpose into a queen's gambit position. Queen's gambit declined. Knight to C3. And then we get a very easy position here for Magnus. And we get this move E3, just stabilizing the center. This video is about the man who almost defeated Magnus Carlsen. Victory was in his hands and it was taken away twice. Pawn to c5, a counter gambit that you usually see on the second move of the game for black, but we see it here on the second move for black. Usually what I like to do here is not take the pawn, I like to develop, but he lets the bishop get to his really good square. Knight out to c6, Fabiano Caruana, and queen to a5. Sorry guys, I'm back into this sort of role. So here's the thing. I know you may see this move to b4. Why is that so bad? Takes you can't take back because the rook is being revealed to the queen, and that is just a free rook. So obviously you can't play b4. My 1200 mind says please play b4. Obviously not. I want to get rid of this stuff. Okay. Anyways, no b4, rook to d1, and rook to d8. Try not to let Magnus dominate this center file. And you get bishop to e2. So far, so good for Magnus Carlsen, obviously. Magnus is a beast. He's not going to lose his game. In a couple moves, castles, less than knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, back on c3, and pawn to h6, which is double to build a cubby, and also to build up to attack this bishop possibly if Fabiano Caruana somehow becomes a 1000 rated player. And we get pawn to a4, just defending this pawn. And here we get our first mistake of the game. Magnus sees that this square is opened up and plays knight to e5. Now, what the computer wanted was knight to d2, planning on the move, I believe, getting ready to prep the move, knight to b3. Sorry, not to b3. Knight to b3. And this pawn would be hanging in certain cases, so you would obviously have to find a way to defend your queen during this sequence, so you'd be able to win the bishop. But obviously not. He finds knight to e5, which is the first mistake of our game. And then we get c takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop to f3, which gives Magnus these two powerful bishops, but Fabiano, obviously not stupid, gets rid of one of the powerful bishops, takes back with the pawn. I apologize. Okay. Takes back with the pawn. Why is that a problem? Apparently it's not. But the computer thinks that after this, it's minus 0.7 if you find bishop to d7. Why is this semi-crucial? Because eventually you want to play rook to, I believe, b8, and you want to just start pushing your pawns. You have a 2-on-2 technically, and you just want to push your pawns out. And you also want to give more space. You want to activate your rook. But obviously, Fabiano's human. He's going to obviously go for the pawn on e5. And Magnus decides to go for the pawn on b7. Rook to b8, which was the move the computer wanted, also to defend this pawn before the move rook to b1. It's a tempo thing. And queen to d3. Bishop d7, which the computer also wanted as a tempo sort of move. And pawn to a5, pushing the pawn. And basically saying to Fabi, this pawn will stay on the board. Offering a bishop trade here by Fabi. And queen to d6. So obviously queen takes d6. It looks dangerous, but it should be fine after bishop takes bishop and the king sliding over, because there really is no true threat, and they're trying to unify these pawns here. So obviously Fabi says you can't do that. b6 is the very obvious move here, and Magnus is down -8. And his position is much worse. c5 to unify the pawns, and to also attack the b6 pawn must be played. only move. The king comes in, takes, and now it looks really dangerous. Rook a8, takes, king to g2. Magnus Carlsen is close to being a pawn down in an endgame. 2 pawns out, just throwing the pawns out there, sort of Magnesian, basically strangle holding. And Magnus plays pawn to d7. I don't know what the idea of pawn sort of to d7 was. I know you were probably going to lose it anyways. After rook to d7, it looks just unguardable in that sort of sense. But obviously, losing the pawn is also not good. I guess you can't take with the rook. It's a check, so obviously you have to take back with the king, and then you go back defending your 2 pawns. Check, king back, and it's -9. Sorry, 9.9. -0.9 at the grandmaster level is very close to being winning. At my level, it's not even winning. And king back. Fabiano wants his king. He's very adamant about it, and Magnus doesn't want his king. There, he's very adamant about it. And now, rook e7 to defend these pawns is also possibly push them. But Fabiano Caruana plays the human move, rook to b4 check, and he blocks with the pawn. Sort of just getting this really tied down. And Fabiano Caruana is up a pawn in an endgame against Magnus Carlsen. Here we go. Pawn to h3. Just a quiet move here to see what Fabiano's getting ready to do. Rook to a5. Rook to b7 and rook to g5. Check. King back. Rook back. And this pawn is being attacked. Obviously, you want to prevent it from being attacked because there's this f3 move possibly in the future, which could be deadly. Rook back up. And these people are getting close to being... These 2 grandmasters are very close to making a draw. My apologies. And with rook to a6, Fabi has a winning advantage. And Fabi here makes a draw. The computer here finds a win for Fabiano Caruana, but Fabiano Caruana doesn't find a win for Fabiano Caruana, which is sometimes how it goes in these sort of games. And Fabiano Caruana draws back-to-back games, one where he was losing and one where he is winning. Well, not losing, but he was not in the advantage, or he wasn't in the driver's seat. And he draws a game where he was in the driver's seat, but it was for a very complex reason. And it just looked like at the end of the day, Magnus was going to somehow find a way to draw this position down the pawn. But the computer obviously doesn't agree with -0.92 on the board after rook a6, but a draw offered and accepted in this World Chess Championship game, leading to another game. Now we are back here in the 2018 World Chess Championship. Fabiano Caruana versus Magnus Carlsen. Game number 7. 3 out of 6 points for both. And here we go again. Magnus with the white pieces and Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces. Here we start with e4, e5, which is an indication that Fabi is sort of ready not to combat as much, but to have an easy day. But apparently I'd be wrong because we have a Petrov classical in this game. And it becomes a very complex position. And obviously, I don't know what Petrov theory, but it looks like they know what they're doing. And we'll trade queens early. And both knights will come back. And knight to a3, developing the knight in an unorthodox way. Just develop the knight at all. And obviously, chase around the knights. Kind of like you see in the Aliokins defense where you chase back knights. And you see this here from Magnus. This position looks very good for Magnus. Magnus has a very active bishop, and Black has moved these knights multiple times. And this bishop's having tough time being in the butt of this knight, but obviously now that opens up again. And even here it's in the butt of two pawns and it's just very weak, so it looks very good for Magnus here. King to f2. And obviously you're trying to bring your rook, but first you play h4 because you're a super grandmaster. And then you bring your knight, knight to e3, and pawn to g3, just building up a clump of pawns that will be able to defend itself. And Fabi decides to open up the center, and Magnus declines. And now the computer wants castles or c takes d4. Castles by Fabiano Caruana, staying patient, getting his king out of the center, allowing himself to kind of take a breath while opening up the center. Rook to the d file. Rook also to the d file from Fabiano Caruana, and knight to g2. The only move that keeps an advantage for black is to take the pawn, and Fabiano obviously takes the pawn because Fabiano's a beast. Pawn takes pawn back, and now we have a draw after the move rook to c8 with the computer wanted was bishop to f5. Why the computer want bishop to f5? Not exactly sure actually. Just to trade the knight and to trade the bishops and get a better position for the knight possibly. But we get rook to c8 and bishop to b3, and then we get knight to c6, and he's just trying to reroute the knight into a better position. And we get a bishop trade offered, and he gets the knight to a5, and here's a rook trade offered. Fabiano will obviously not let up his file, and he brings the bishop back in a very odd move. Obviously, you can bring the bishop back, but why would you bring the bishop back in that fashion? I'm not fully sure. And obviously, you get the knight just trotting in. You can defend this pawn very simply by pushing it, but then you get knight to a3. And that knight will be very dangerous. And here, rook to c8. Well, rook to c1. Knight back. He wants to trade. And we have knight to e3. Fabiano does not have a winning advantage, but he does have the best chances so far. And he plays knight to c3. Bishop to c2 by Magnus. Bishop to a3 by Magnus. Not Magnus, by Fabiano. Everyone's Magnus today, ladies and gentlemen. Bishop to c8. Sorry, bishop b8. Not c8. Bishop b8. There's a bishop on c8. That's black. And there's a white bishop. And that's on b8. Only move here, a6. That looks like a really weird move. I mean, there's only very few chances where the bishop can slide across the board. Pawn to f4. Bishop to d7. And the pawn keeps pushing itself. And now Fabiano's getting a little closer. He's not fully in there yet, but getting a little closer. He defends his pawn. A trade offered there. Knight to d1 was winning. Bishop to b2, taking the pawn. But here comes a check. And here comes his captures. And the bishop defends the knight. Bishop back, trying to reroute. And here we get an attack on the white bishop. The white squared white bishop captures. And Fabiano Caruana is very close to breaking this game open, and he gets the way to break the game open. Only move to keep it close is a4, bishop e3, and we get g4. Like we saw in the last game, not minus 9.92 for Fabiano, and he finally moved bishop a3. After 27 seconds, he plays bishop a3. Never in my life will I find bishop a3. The king begins to get active. Pawns begin to push. And here you had a minus 0.1 advantage. And he finds knight to c3. Push, take. And this king has to come in. Knight a4. This is super grandmaster level stuff. So obviously knight to t5 gets played. Pawn up. And it's completely winning for Fabiano at the grandmaster level. Minus 1.5. Push. He does lose a little of the advantage, but Magnus gives it right back with king to g4. Knight to b7. King f7. Bishop e1. Hell, almost any move here is winning. He finds knight to e4. Bishop e1 here is what you need. He finds it. Trying to attack the knight. Brings it back. And a mistake by Magnus, giving a -2 advantage for Fabiano Caruana. The largest advantage of the match so far. Bishop takes a5. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. King g6. Bishop back. A mistake by Fabiano, but it's not too crucial. King h7 after 2 minutes of thought, and knight f7. Fabiano is tearing and mowing down. Knight to e5. And a mistake again by Magnus. Here we need bishop a5. Bishop a5. Fabiano Caruana is beasting. He's going full stock fish. And h5. And bishop d2 kind of gives a little life back to the current world champion at this point. Now here you need to find knight to g4. He finds knight to f3. The difference? Not too sure. Here in my plan, I find knight to g4 because it cuts off the pawn. What is the point of knight to f3? I guess to reroute the knight, check, or to just reroute the knight entirely to attack a pawn. Bishop to g5. And he finds it. This is winning. At this point, Fabiano had expressed in later that he thought this was completely drawn. There was no way to crack. He just thought he would keep playing for winning advantages. And here he begins to shuffle his pieces around. King, he's kind of losing the thread a little bit. You don't like to lose the thread a lot. Bishop d3, king f4. He's getting that thread back a little bit. Why would bishop d3? Not the move. This is the same. Bishop c2 here by Magnus. And now knight g4. And here we get some issues. We need bishop a4 here. Magnus plays bishop b3. But here we get a mistake with Fabiano on knight e3. Fabiano's getting a little too overzealous here, and now his winning advantage is completely decimated. Completely decimated. Bishop takes a6 is the only move, brilliant move technically, and here is drawn. Fabiano Caruana in one move had a -1.14 advantage, 1.41 advantage, and lost it. Here you need king e4. The game's lost. Not lost, it's drawn. It's devastating to have two games and 7 games of match for the World Chess Championship, and in a draw when you were winning. This is not even the worst part. They go 15 rounds. And up next is what happens in the 15th round. When you don't take it. Spoiler alert, did not win this World Championship match, and Magnus Carlsen retained his title. Despite, so if Fabi won this game, it would have been 7-8 going into game number 15. It opens with e4 by Magnus and c5. Fabiano needs a win this game. He plays c5. Plays the Sicilian. He needs a win. He's going to get confrontational. Knight f3, e6. Oh, here we go. Let's put the dukes up. Let's get confrontational here. c4, knight c6. c4, c6, c4. If I wants this center open, he needs it opened. Knight f6 is what I preferred. I wish he played that. But bishop out. Knight to b3, knight to c2. Oh my gosh, what game was I looking at? Knight to f6. So Fabi, in theory, is up after the opening stage. Knight to c3, queen b6 was needed there, but a castle and Fabi loses the advantage again. This match had Fabiano Caruana winning slightly or completely winning multiple times, and Fabiano Caruana could not sustain his advantage. Bishop e3. and b6. In bishop b2, bishop b7. It looks almost completely symmetrical. They spent a lot of time thinking. Sorry, not a lot of time. They spent very limited time thinking. I mean, Fabiano's doling out his moves, and Fabiano must have not really reviewed these moves. I'm not trying to insult Fabiano, but it doesn't look as if he has the moves order. I mean, he spent 3 minutes on move 6. I mean, when you spend 3 minutes on move 6, at that point, you don't know what your prep is anymore. Rook to d1. Rook fd1, sorry. And knight to e5. Fabiano getting a little too aggressive here. A little too aggressive here. Now bishop takes bishop is winning. Well, not winning, but it's a slight advantage. And, you know, now looking so good. Now here you need to find f4. And obviously Magnus freaking Carlsen finds f4. What a beast. Knight to g6. Bishop f3 is needed here. When does Magnus play? Queen a3, very stabilizing. d6 and rook up to d2. Try to add a second layer of attack. a6 here. And we get a second layer of attack. Rook a d1. Queen c7. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a boxing match of our lives. Fabiano Caruana needing a win here. Magnus calm. Pawn to b3 a little too calm. But obviously, in a game that went 50 moves, I just checked, obviously. h6, g3, stabilizing again. Magnus, he's fine with the draw. Fabiano needs the win. Rook to d7, adding another layer of defense. Knight to e1, and sorry, not knight to e1. Bishop f3, and rook to e8. It's a drawn position. I mean, Magnus is okay with that. Queen to f2. Magnus is completely fine with the draw here. h3, rook e8, and bishop to g2. And when you need a win, you get desperate. Knight c6. Mistake by Fabiano. And we have a little bit of problem. Why is that a mistake? Because you allow g4. You allow this big attack. And this attack is seemingly deadly. Knight t8 is needed here, but queen a5. Not a bad move. Not a bad move at all. Now knight to a4. And queen to c7. So Fabiano has one thing changed about his position. He has less moves, and white is winning. And a mistake by Magnus, e5, d6, e5. And Magnus is struggling, but knight takes is brutal. And that's what Magnus must have calculated. But what Magnus missed is after d takes e5, knight takes e5, it's drawn. Not losing, but it's drawn. Which is fine for Magnus. But now there's a little bit of a problem here. Now Fabiano's battling with him. Bishop a8 is played here. E takes f4 would have been better. F takes e5 is needed here, or g5. F takes e5. Queen takes e5. And knight slides in. He's asking the questions. He's knocking on the door. But Fabiano has the answers. Queen b2. Uh-oh. Now you got to defend yourself here. And the only move here is knight takes f6. Check. That's drawn. And queen d6. Takes. And here takes, check, and takes the bishop. Now here you have some decent threats. Here I'm playing knight to b4, no question, but obviously Fabiano wants to give a check and move the kings to the h file. And give another check. defend his knight, but then move it because there's being double attacked, and also to be defending his pawn. Also be defending his pawn. Now here, as you look at the clocks, both players are a little bit behind the clock. Check, and pawn advancement f5. G takes f5. E takes f5. Queen e3. Knight e6. And you may have wondered why my tone of voice changed. Pawn to b4. Fabiano Caruana could not have been more perfect in this World Championship match. But to beat a robot, you have to be better than perfect. And knight to g5 is a mistake, which allows c5. Queen to f6 is a move that somewhat stabilizes it. He finds it. a4 now, needed by Magnus, but he advances. And again, Fabiano, I would be tired through my mind. I mean, just so stressful. Especially playing against one of the best players in the world. Blunders. Knight to e6. And what he blundered was a4. Knight c7. And what he did blunder was the idea of queen f4. Now why this is so spectacular? 1. The pawn that allows a check to the king is weak, and the queen only has one move to defend both. So we get knight to e6 back, which allows queen to d6. Queen a1 check, just trying to find something that will save. Back king back to h2, knight to d4, pawn being pushed again. Queen c3, Fabiano Caruana feeling his world championship hopes going away from him. Queen c5, queen e3, queens, f4, queen to g4, and Fabiano Caruana resigned and lost the World Chess Championship. And your new and old World Chess Champion, Magnus Carlsen, almost beat it, but not. The man closest to Fabiano Caruana